All right, Lyles. So I wanted to show you kind of what I'm looking at for this next week. Hopefully you and I can meet before the rubric meeting, but I wanted to kind of give you an update on kind of where we are with the various forms that we need to compile the the databases that we're building. Okay, so I apologize if my mic doesn't sound good. I'm doing this as quickly as I can before I have to head out really fast. But first off, we're going to look at the activities form. And so this is the same Google Sheet. People filled this Google Sheet out prior to this fiscal year or during this fiscal year. But I went ahead and just kind of refreshed the way that that all works. So I've got the key here explaining what they're filling out. And then they'll go down here to 2021 activities, not to 2020 activities. So for 2021, they're going to put in the same information that they did. It's just organized a little bit better here based on how we're looking at information, based on the rubric and also the database itself. So they're going to list the activity name, the narrative describing it, the department lead, the function that the activity relates to or fulfills rather, the type of activity. This is just a kind of organizational classification that we've been using to help filter when we're looking at the database. So you can just look at all the programs, all of the support activities, all of the exhibits, that kind of thing, as you need to without having to look through 200 lines of database at once. And then a classification of whether it's a new activity or an existing activity. So basically, this is the operational list. This isn't the overall large project list. These are operational things that could be primary projects, but they may not elevate to the point of needing the project manager's work breakdown structure database sheet that we also have that I'll show you later. Whether or not it incorporates multiple functions, what the secondary function would be, the audience focus, and if there's a recognized opportunity for audience growth. Just a blurb about the value proposition if they are going to put that in there. I don't know if you wanted me to take that out completely or not, and whether or not this is an obligated activity. The same information that we've seen before, start and end date for that activity. So for instance, if it's a lecture series, as this example shows, the first lecture takes place in January, the last one takes place in September. So instead of adding every date within the lecture series here, they would just put in the overall dates, and there's a different place where they can take care of the doing that elsewhere. Or rather, this is part of the overall planning, and I know that those other dates change quite frequently, and so I have a workflow for doing some changes and some updates, which I'll show you soon as well. Whether or not these items are using our collection, certain amounts of time, or even space. This I'm sure will grow over time. We will expand this out as we need to, but I think our Gantt charts will help with that as well. This also can help with the budgeting, with approving things for budget season, I'm sure, because you'd be able to see how much effort something is going to take overall and whether or not the juice is kind of worth the squeeze on that. And staff involvement. So this is another resource. These were general resources, and this is staff. So you list yes, maybe, or no, because I'm sure there are going to be activities that someone thinks someone may be needed, but they don't want to say yes, they don't want to say no, so I'm allowing them to say maybe on those if they don't have the information. The reason why I'm adding all that in there is because, unlike this past year, I'd like to try to get as much information into this database as possible, because once we can see everything, we can then make actions on the data as we need to, whether it's filtering on it or just being able to see what hasn't been fully fleshed out. And I don't mean as far as going through the rubric, the 4 core questions, but I mean as far as this resource management part as well. So if we have a lot of maybes on something, it's good to see that, I would assume, because then it lets you know that maybe we need to double down on that activity and make sure that we go ahead and get our ducks in a row on that before it elevates to the status of a really large project that requires a lot of time, and someone may not have been prepared for that within some of these departments, in particular the support departments. And so unlike the previous database where we didn't list every department, this time I did. I noticed in the meeting request for the rubric meeting anyway, that every department is basically listed, at least all the managers and directors of those departments, and they didn't really have representation in the database. We spent a lot of time talking about programmatic things, but I don't think that we have to worry about that anymore, because, for instance, someone who's working on an operational activity that is meant to be internally affected or affect our internal staff, they can still list that here. Those things are still things that have time and money budgeted to them. So that's how this was built out. So that's what's different here. Everything else is basically the same. And when people fill that out, the information is going to plop into this activities table in the FY2021 project database. Now I can combine every year into a single database, but I wanted to get something kind of clean first before I start to combine them. So FY21 I've separated out from FY2020. That database still exists and can still be accessed, but I want to see these things separately, at least for now, and I can fix that for leadership very easily in the future. So the 2021 database is not going to be automatically updated. This will be manually done, because as soon as people are done with that spreadsheet, once we have a cutoff date on that, when that cutoff date hits, I'm going to deactivate the spreadsheet. It won't take any more entries, and I'm going to dump all the information in here with the CSV import. And the reason for that is in order to handle the automation of people doing changes as frequently as it seemed like they wanted to this past year, I came across a couple programming bugs, a couple tech bugs, and I didn't want that to slow anything down this year. So everything gets dumped into here first, then it gets put into here after that. Now, once people have added some things, so you can see I've got these example activities. Once people have added things and they start to see this, it's very possible that they want to make changes to some of the information. In particular, it could be start and end dates. So I have a way for them to do that. And so when I'll send everybody this form, and this form allows them to tell me what they want to have updated, just give me the information, and then whenever they fill this out, a record will show in the updates table that they'll also be able to view. So every time they request a change to any of these activities, every record of that will be kept here automatically, and will also say when I've resolved it, when I've made the changes to the timeline or to whatever, to the database overall. And that's good for accountability for me, but also just to help people know when their things are being fixed in the database, so they don't have to call and email so much to try to figure that out. So once something has been added or changed the way that they want it to be, it'll reflect here, but I'll also make a note here to let them know that that's done. And they can view this anytime they want to. No special login is needed. They can just view the updates, view the update log, or rather the ticket log for that. Okay, so once everything's in here, we manipulate all this data the same way that we had before, and there were lots of dashboards and whatnot that I am able to make for that. So, for example, you can look at the number of activities based on audience focus. So you can look at how many activities we have for a certain audience versus another audience, and so on and so forth. And as all the information gets dumped in there, it'll be very easy to see how valuable this visualization will be. There are other visualizations that we can do with that as well, including timelines and all that, but you've already seen that, so you've seen that in the past. Now I want to move on to the thing that's really new, where we realized that the project management aspects of this database or possibilities of this database were going to be very, very useful for everybody across the museum, regardless of whether they're working on something on the operational level or a little bit higher. So what I've done is I've made a spreadsheet that will be handed out to project managers. So if you have a large project like a new exhibit or an exhibit refresh or things like that, you can put the project name, the department that's the overall lead of that project, the name of the project manager, and the project type. So that might be exhibit or program or something like that. And in the category, we're going to list whether it's a public-facing project or it's an internal project. So HR, finance, marketing, all of, lots of people who aren't necessarily doing programmatic things on the day-to-day, but they are doing large projects that do need to be looked at from a leadership standpoint and really just an operational standpoint. They can also use this as well to help them with their planning. So on the left-hand side, they're going to list all the different activities that take place in that project in order for it to be completed from beginning to end. So that could be ideation, it could be research, it could be development, training, lots of things, marketing, and then the person that's actually the lead for that activity. So this is great for collaborative projects. The start and end date for that activity and the type of work. So I've got a couple categories in here, and I've actually got a few more that I'm going to add, and I'll show you those when you see the database. And then benchmarks. So if they have specific benchmarks within their project, it's not an activity, but just a goal, a milestone, something needs to be completed by a certain time, or it's a check-in date, a follow-up date, that sort of thing. They can list those here with the start and end dates of those benchmarks as well. That takes into account a lot of the different forms and things that I've seen so far. The one that you and Priscilla had shown me, but then also this one here, the artifact-based programming Gantt chart. I went ahead and took a look at this and try to figure out how people are working now and how this tool can actually better serve them as well. So when all of that's in to the spreadsheet, every time that they make one of these, so every project manager will get this. They can make copies of it and just send in spreadsheets with their particular projects, or we could keep them all attached here as separate sheets, whatever we decide to do with that. The project work breakdown structure will be seen in the project WBS table of the project database. So if I'm looking at all the data, this is a lot of demo data. So the only real project that's listed in here right now is the McMullen conversion, the McMullen room conversion. So these items here. The rest of it is actually just things that I've heard about, or they're just demos, just to demonstrate how the Gantt charts and all these various visualizations would work. So I'm going to group everything here by project. And so I've got the McMullen conversion project here, all the activities, the start and end dates of the activities, the person that was in charge primarily of those activities, and then the type of work being done. And I listed launch date as well, because that actually will help us filter out launch dates when we look at Gantt charts. You also could look at this demo exhibit. This was built on the timeline that I had received from Priscilla, from you and Priscilla, that looked at a general exhibit timeline with, sort of in Gantt form. Same idea, and then I listed the demo exhibit here, the demo exhibit number 2. This is basically taking everything that was in this artifact-based programming Gantt chart and putting it into a structure that we can all read in the database. So every activity is listed here, as well as the departments involved, going on beyond that. So there's a lot of data in this, and so because there's a lot of data in this, we can filter out a lot of things. So not only do we know the main department in charge of an activity, but we also know secondary departments involved as well. And the reason for that is going to be very clear in a moment. So I wanted to make, I separated out general operations tasks as well. So if we start to actually just list general operations tasks, I've got a filter on here. Whoops. Okay. We start to filter out things that are general operations that aren't high-level projects. We can do that, but that's a little bit in the weeds, and that's really just something I'm kind of demoing at the moment. But leaving that in there allows us to build out the calendar, the Gantt chart calendar, much more fully. And I also made views that everyone will have access to. And these views will be of particular work breakdown structures for particular departments. So for example, I made one for audiovisual. This takes every project that's listed, the overall project work breakdown structure from this view, which is a lot of information, and just filters it out to show the only the things that are involving audiovisual or exhibit technology as a team. So whether we are the primary department or with the secondary department on a particular item within a project, this just shows me what I need to see as an AV manager. I can look at everything else, but if I'm just wanting to dial down into my stuff, I can do that. I did the same thing with collections and conservation and basically every department, or I'm going to if I haven't already finished every department being listed in there. So that, I think, will be very helpful for managers of departments, while this view would be very helpful for overall project managers to see everybody involved in their projects specifically. How does all that relate to timelines? It relates to timelines because if I go to a dashboard where I'm just going to show a demo of one. I'm going to make this full screen. I'm going to zoom in on this particular dashboard. I can look at a timeline that shows these high-level big projects and where they all fall, and I can double-click into each one to show the various activities, and I can color code based on what I choose. So in this case, I've chosen to color code based on the department that's involved here. So you'll notice that certain, this is DOI, and so this is the same color as this one here, which is also mainly DOI. So I can filter onto a certain project. Within the timeline, I can zoom in and out. So for instance, actually let's look at the demo exhibit number 2 again. This is a 5-year view. I would zoom in this because the project actually only takes place in 2 years. So I'm going to go to a year view. So it's a little bit easier to read now. And I would just filter through or just read through everything related to that project if that's what I was concerned with. You can see if I add the general operations task, which I'm not showing here, but if I add the general operations task as well, you'd see all of those things in the same calendar on top of one another. Where this gets really powerful is when I start to do department-based dashboards. So I'm going to make a dashboard really quick. I'm just going to show you how this works if I can. There we go. I want to see the AV project dates, and I want to group by project. There we go. Okay, so this Gantt chart is now showing all the tasks in any project that are specifically related to audiovisual. And so again, a department manager would find this really useful because all they'd have to do is go to a certain view and they could see their timeline and not have to see everything overall. They have the ability to see everything overall, but I'm giving them the ability to also just filter on something really specific to them as well. I could change this to say exhibit design. And so now I see a timeline of all exhibit design tasks, and I can even collapse that down to show the project. So for example, for exhibit design, their work on the demo exhibit project starts between March and ends in December, but for everyone else it may be February to July and so on and so forth. So this just dials it down for them so that they can see things more specifically to them. I hope that's really helpful. If people want to update this in particular, I'll work out a different means of them updating it, but I think that this should set us up really well for the future.